Hello, hello, hi. Are we ready to start? Should we crack on? So welcome to the this month's meeting of the South London Waste Partnership Joint Committee. I'm your chair, Councillor Natasha Ryans from Merton, and I'll just start by saying this is being live streamed. We're not expecting any fire drills, so if you hear one, please exit the building. I think we'll start with a round of introductions, just so we know who everybody is. Start over here.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Billy Christie from Merton, and for this year, I'm the Vice Chair of the committee.
Okay, good evening, Councillor John Sweeney from Kingston, portfolio holder responsible for waste.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Scott Ross from Croydon, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Streets and Environment.
Luke Taylor from Sutton, substituting on behalf of Barry Lewis.
Christopher Woolmer, Sutton and Vice Chair for EST, Environment and Sustainable Transport.
Okay, so are there I've got apologies from Councillor Lewis, so Councillor Taylor is substituting, and from Councillor Maunders as well.
I've got apologies from Councillor Cummings, Jason Cummings.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Great. Are the minutes from the meeting held on the 13th of July agreed? Agreed. Okay, brilliant. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, and the lead officer here is Andrew Keys. And this is the Joint Committee is asked to note the contents of this report and to comment on any aspects of performance of the partnership's transfer, treatment and recycling and disposal contracts. So over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so thank you. This is the report, and it covers the it's an update on the performance of the transfer, treatment, recycling and disposal services that are procured and managed by South London Waste Partnership. You'll see that there are 5 contracts in this report. You've got food and green waste receipt and transport, food and green waste treatment, the new food and green waste services contract, household reuse and recycling centre contract, and also the residual waste services contract. If I can start you on part 2 of the report, which starts the summary of the performance detail. The 2008 food and green waste contract for the receipt and haul of the services at 2.2, I've just summarised that the contract operated effectively during the reporting period, as it's done through the entire term of the contract. It came to an end on the 31st of August, and as I said, no issues to report at any point in this contract, so I'm very pleased with the handover to the new contractor. Part 3 of the report, again, is the 2008 food and green waste, and that's the treatment service. And again, just a very brief update to say there were no issues. The contract operated smoothly, and the handover was really smooth on the 31st of August. So really pleased to report both of those. If we move on to part 4 of the report, I've just put in some details about the new food and green waste contract that mobilised on the 1st of September. And I'll just give you a quick summary of what that contract entails, as it's a new service. So it entails the receipt of the food and green waste collected by London boroughs of Croydon, Merton, Sutton and Kingston. Croydon, Merton and Sutton direct deliver their material, the green waste, into the sewage transfer station located in Merton. And then we have food waste that's either directly delivered to the AD facility in Merton, or the material can be delivered to the Suez Merton transfer station. Royal Borough of Kingston obviously has the Kingston Council owned Villiers Road transfer station, so all of their material, both the food and green, goes there. In terms of the treatment facilities, we're really pleased to have 3 anaerobic digestion facilities. We've got biocollectors, as I say, which is the AD facility located in Merton. And then we also have Severn Trent located in Surrey, and a site called Olico, and that's located in Aylesbury. So the green waste, as I said, the contract started on the 1st of September and it mobilised smoothly. So happy to report on that. Section 5 of the report, I'd like to move on to the HRRC service. In terms of, if we start with site user experience, in terms of the customer satisfaction surveys, they've been undertaken since 2016. We've got a lot of data showing continued satisfaction with the service, and you can see some of the questions and answers there in the appendix to the report. You can also find on the website full details of each of the customer satisfaction survey results for each of your individual boroughs. So there's a lot of information there, really valuable information that we've collected since 2016. In terms of recycling performance at 5.6 of the report, apologies if I'm running through this, 5.6 of the report, you can see that the sites achieved a combined recycling rate of 67.3% for Q1. I like to pick out some, notable changes and notable increases or drops. And the key things that I wanted to point out is we've seen a drop in tonnes brought to the site by residents in all of the sites, with the exception of the Factory Lane site. And we've seen that drop across the Q1 period compared to the same period last year. We've also seen a notable drop in rubble tonnes across all sites and a notable drop in waste electrical tonnes across all sites. Green waste also has gone down, except again at the Factory Lane site, which saw a small increase. Another thing I wanted to highlight at this point in the report as well is that July was a very dry month. So we did have very low green waste tonnages. And so it's important when we look at our recycling rates and our performance at both the curbside and the HRRC site that we did get quite a significant drop in green waste tonnes. I wanted to talk a little bit about improvement measures. If we look at the reuse shop, a very brief update on the reuse shops. The Fisher's Farm site in Croydon, that was originally operated by the reuse staff, opening 3 days a week. However, it was a bit quiet and we weren't getting the turnover of materials and the sales that we were hoping for. So we've requested that the Veolia staff operate the site 7 days a week. So that's now open to the public 7 days a week, which is really positive. We continue to progress the upcycle workshop. I'm going to keep you updated on that. It's not gone live yet, but we will keep you updated on that. 5.14 assisted tipping. Very pleased to say assisted tipping is available at all sites now. And we are just at the testing stage with our booking forms, because what we'd like to do is have the ability for a resident to book some assistance when they come to the HRRC site. So I think that's really important that the staff know that someone's coming that's going to need assistance in one of those bays. So really pleased with the progress on that. If we turn to part 6 of the report now, you've got the residual waste treatment contract. You can see that for the reporting period, which is for the data is the 1st of April to the 30th of June, we actually saw a 5.7% drop in our residual waste tonnes. So that's a really positive downward trend that we're seeing now. And that in just Q1 has saved the boroughs over 300,000 in just that first quarter. So we're really pleased to see that positive move down. Again, in Appendix A, you can see some nice summary tables that show the downward movement of the waste. We talk about emissions in 6.4, 5, 6, 7 and 6.8 of the report. At the last Joint Waste Committee, we talked about the exceedances over the last 12 months. We requested from Viridor a rectification plan. We're pleased to be working through that draft rectification plan with Viridor. In terms of actions already taken, they've got some operational measures already in place, and this includes driver training on identifying these materials in the load, loader training, and also waste blend training to ensure a more homogeneous waste. And we've also started with Viridor. Viridor have also started to look at some artificial intelligence, so some technology that can detect this certain materials in the waste. It's really new technology used in this fashion, but it's really exciting actually. I put in the report the weighbridge, but I think what they're progressing now is in the bunker. So this is how much it keeps progressing and moving, but it's a really exciting piece of technology that Beddington's one of the first to be trialing this in their fleet. So you've got there at 6.6, you've got a table that shows the emissions exceedances since May. 15th of September, we also saw a 2.23 milligram VOC exceedance that occurred due to a brief cessation of waste going through the plant. So that's all at 6.6. Finally, 6.9 of the report, we talk about the permit variation. I won't repeat all the detail because I think we've talked about that in this committee a few times, but we did, of course, write to the EA. We agreed to write to the EA after the last committee meeting, and they have responded now, and they've confirmed that the application will be subject to a period of public consultation, and that a 6-week consultation period is likely, and it's likely to start in December. And it's interesting to note actually that they've extended that period. It would normally be 4 weeks, and they've extended it to 6. So we're really pleased that that they've listened and they've received the letters and acted positively. So yeah, so to conclude, that the recommendation is to note the contents, and I'm more than happy to take questions around the performance report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So I've got indications from basically both Sutton councillors, so I will go over to you first. Go, Councillor Taylor first, and then.
Why, thank you. Okay, so the gas bottle problem, it sounds like it's pretty key to a number of the exceedances. And you mentioned AI scanning, which I assume is similar to the sort of airport scanner processes that pick out particular shapes and materials that are of interest and can then identify those for further treatment. Do you see that as being of major potential to reduce that? Because my original question before you mentioned that was really, what are we doing to address the gas bottle problem? Again, it's mentioned in a number of the exceedances. We had a site visit a couple of weeks ago, and it was something we talked about to both the operators in the mixing hall who are responsible for spotting items in there that shouldn't be in there. So first of all, is the AI solution for that? Second kind of sub question within there is, what campaigns are you running to inform residents that if they do pick them up, that they don't go into the waste stream? And is the partnership doing any sort of lobbying at all of the government to actually address the root cause of this, which is that they're being sold to public when they shouldn't be, and to actually resolve the issue rather than coming up with solutions to spot them when they get to the end use site, for example. That's probably, I think that's pretty thorough. Okay, and on your last point, completely agree. I mean, you know, the NHS has recently published some concerning data about the impact of this as well, you know, the recreational use of the nitrous oxide. So it's a really important issue, you know, for so many reasons before it even comes to our door. So in terms of the approach that we're taking and things that we're doing, I think it's important, and we've discussed this with Viridor, that we target it at every single point that we can. So it's important not to wait until it's in the bunker. So it's a combination of talking to residents and commercial customers as well, to make sure it doesn't go in the waste in the first place. And like you say, helping to lobby to either get better restrictions or also actually make it clear where these gas bottles should go. Traditionally, we would have a take back, you know, so you'd repatriate, wouldn't you, with the retailer that sold it. But Amazon creates this, well, I shouldn't say Amazon, online purchasing creates this whole new challenge in terms of take backs. So I suppose that the key is it's got to be done from the point at which it's disposed, the physical point at which it's received, and that's the operational things that we can do in the AI. In terms of the physical operational, when it gets to the site, there are, and I think on the site tour, hopefully they would have talked about it in better detail than I can, but they will be doing things like questioning the drivers. They'll be looking at the discharge point, and then at the blending stage as well, when they're in the crane, the operators can also do that mixing process, and that really helps as well to identify. The AI, I think, like I said, it's quite a new technology being applied. It's not new technology, but it's new in its application to this. It is. So basically, you have to teach this bit of equipment to recognise, and then once it learns what the unauthorised types of waste are, be it gas canisters and other things as well, then it starts to learn and it's artificial intelligence, isn't it? Is it? Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor, just say you need to use your microphone so they can pick you up on the.
Yeah, so yeah, it's so I don't think it's a new technology, but it's a very new application for the waste industry. So we're really pleased that you know they're going ahead with this and they're using it. They're going to be trialing it at Beddington. In terms of lobbying and campaigns, I think if I can ask you to pick that up, John, because I know there's a lot of work going into that at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of lobbying, first of all, we've approached the British Compressed Gas Association. They have a campaign. They're lobbying the government for a complete ban on commercial sales of nitrous oxide canisters, which is something that I think we would support. So we've approached them to find out, you know, what's happening with that campaign, how we can support it. Viridor have also briefed and approached all of the local MPs covering the area. So hopefully, once we've got some information from the association on what sort of support that we can lend, and we've mobilised the local MPs to help us do that. So we are exploring that. And from a campaign perspective, Viridor have they're just in the process of confirming exactly how much, but they're putting quite a substantial budget towards an awareness campaign focused purely in our area. Had a meeting with them earlier today actually to look at the latest kind of designs, creatives for that campaign, what it will look like. Hopefully that will go live in the next few weeks, and that will be a really sort of, you know, important part of the mix. But I think it's got to be a real sort of you know, multi-pronged attack on this, because I don't think there's any one single answer. I mean, a complete ban on commercial sales would certainly help. That's the that's the obvious one, isn't it? So I think we should put a lot of our efforts into that and see if we can progress that. But there are lots of other things going on as well.
Okay, Councillor Woolmer.
Yeah, just interested and intrigued by 510, the soil separation recycling. Just wondered how efficient the process is. Is it energy intensive or not particularly? And how much of the soil do you get out of the rubble? Is it like nearly 100%? And have you got any sort of nice graphs or figures to show how it's going? When you say 722 tons of soil, how much of that? How much rubble has? What percentage of that is that of the total rubble that you started with?
Thank you. Really good questions. I'd like to say it's a really technical and you know, and precise science, but we do basically ask people when they come to the site, if they haven't already separated it out, to work with the operatives to separate it out. And at most of the sites, there's like a little grid, a little shaker grid that you do the separation. So it's a very simple, very manual separation, but it's been in place a long time and it works. And that my view is, you know, don't overcomplicate it if it works. It's a good question about the percentages, and I'm gonna have to come back to you about that. I take lots of notes and bring lots of data with me, but that's one thing that I haven't brought with me. I am sorry, so I will have to come back to you on that. But I've been really pleased about the public response, because it needs the public to participate for this to work, and they've been fantastic, and they've you know, we've not had complaints about this extra activity that they have to carry out. So yeah, it's really, you know, really hats off to the operatives and the public for participating in this and actively separating it out. Okay.
Councillor Rush.
Thank you. Yeah, so my questions are related on to 511 and 512. So the reuse shops, for example, do we know how popular they've been, how much they've been used? You know, what campaign can we do to further promote that? And with the upcycling workshops, it says preparations continue. Do you know the timescale of when that's likely to come into play? Because obviously it's the top part of the process that we need to do more on. I think this is an important aspect of that. So I just wanted to find out about that.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the reuse shop, it has been incredibly quiet at the Fisher's Farm site, and so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to open it up to 7 days a week.
We'd like really to expand the shops further. It's really about the footprint that we have at each of our sites, the ability to push that further. But we tend to, I mean, this is a positive time of year as we come up to Christmas. We really we do see an increase in particularly the children's bike sales. They're incredibly popular, and we do see a lot more sales towards Christmas. So I think we did a campaign close to Christmas, didn't we, in previous years? I think that's a good suggestion, actually. I think I might look at doing that. I'm looking at John. I think that's something that we can repeat from previous years, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion, especially if we're trying to, I know that Kimpton Parkway, the shop's very successful, but it's more established, it's been there for longer. So it sounds like Fisher's Farm needs a bit of a boost. I think particularly with the, the cost of living crisis at the moment, we could link a campaign in with that very successfully, couldn't we? So I'll take that forward.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry. Was there another point? I forgot. You carry on. Sorry, I was going to just say no more questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, in terms of the upcycle, we really are just waiting for this special delivery of this specialist container, which is really quite frustrating because we've got the people wanting to give these workshops lined up, and I think there's going to be interest in them, but obviously we don't want to start talking about it, advertising it for people to use until the new building is delivered. It's information to come. Yeah, I mean, again, I'd hope that we'd have it in place for the pre-Christmas period, because I think that would be really, really useful. But I will keep coming back with updates on that. Thank you.
So, any other questions? Can I just pick up on the point about the reuse shops and the upcycling workshop? I think in a previous meeting we had talked about how we might try and bring these to high street, because I personally, I don't drive. I don't use the tip in that way. And I imagine when I have used it, I want to get in and get out. I'm not there to hang around. So I imagine as a partnership, we've probably got a lot of things we could do in our borough's high streets around this sort of reuse and upcycling. Perhaps there's something we could do together instead of just waiting for people to go to tips, and bringing a bit of a kind of holistic approach to our high streets with these sort of things instead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's linking up, isn't it? Two different parts of within each of the boroughs. It's two different departments, isn't it? Just linking them up, really, isn't it? Because in theory, the reason we have them and we host them at the HRC sites is because we have access to that material, and we can very easily sort of bring it forward. And I think any sort of off-site workshop would need to have some sort of minimum time in order, to set up the infrastructure to do deliveries and pick out the material. But I think the interest is there. If we can get commitment and some property and some empty units from business sites, then I think that would be the way forward.
Sorry, Councillor Roche.
I just wanted to, do we have comparative schemes across the country that, in terms of, so we can see how much demand there potentially is? Obviously, is this a relatively new idea? I mean, I've heard of this based on the reports I've read before, but I've not heard of it elsewhere as working and active. So I was just interested if there was other schemes that have worked really well, because it does sound really good. It's good potential.
Do you know, I'll have to take a look into that. I mean, many I have heard of, and I do know of other sites that have employed, the councils have directly employed personnel to help train. They use the waste electrical equipment, and they help train the NEAT category in how to repair the waste electrical items. And that's a scheme that I've seen elsewhere, very much driven by the council, but nothing quite like this. I don't know anything that's quite like what we're doing here, which is very much building on that trend that we've got at the moment, which is to take old furniture and upcycle that. So it's not really, it's kind of a separate category to upskilling that this waste electrical project was, but that's probably the closest example. So yeah, I'll have a look, but I think it's quite a new thing. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor, you wanted to come back on something? Okay, would you want to go to the next question then?
Yeah, I'd like to just talk about some of the emissions and the exceedances for a little bit, in a kind of related way. So there's been, over the last couple of months into August particularly, there were a couple of false alarms, I'm going to describe them as, in emissions exceedances, really caused by the kind of independent sensor network, so the Imperial Breed London sensor. So I think on the 6th of August, there was a reading on there, which subsequently, when investigated, was found to be due to the sensor being calibrated. And then on the 11th of August, due to concrete laying near the sensor, I think it was. Both of those were publicised by local media, which typically do a very good job of highlighting and raising issues about air quality concerns for residents. And I think they do a good job of that. However, in this case, we had undue concern being caused to residents because both of these particular issues were, upon further investigation, found to not be emissions exceedances from the ERF, but due to an error in the Breed London network, and also for another source. So kind of my question is really, what can we do to be more proactive to investigate where there is a reported exceedance from the independent network? Because I think it is important that that exists and that people keep an eye on it and people monitor it. And when questions are raised over, well, actually, is this something I need to worry about? Because you then have misinformation being spread, concern being spread that is not, it is not, in these cases, the first one not existing at all, but in the second case, not as widespread as people may assume if it was a broader and from the ERF. What can we do to be more proactive to respond to reports like that? Because I think in both cases, we were quite disappointed by how long it took to get an answer on what the sources were, and reassure residents that there wasn't something amiss, and effectively that they shouldn't be locking themselves in their home to ride it out, as it were.
I mean, yeah, the first point to make is it's, whenever that sort of information goes out into the public, when it's an unnecessary concern that's been raised and unfounded, and it's useful if the sources of those reports, it would be useful if they checked first with us as the partnership and the council. So that was the first thing I would probably say is that kind of request out there to those in receipt of that information to sort of liaise with us, before making statements that, as you say, unnecessarily concern people. And that's the first point, is I don't want there to be unnecessary concern. The second point is I particularly don't, we don't want it to be linked to the ERF if it isn't in connection with the ERF. I mean, in terms of our transparency of the emissions data, we're probably, I haven't seen another facility that offers the same sort of transparency that we do in terms of our emissions. We publish them regularly. They're publicly available. I suppose it's every 2 weeks, so there is that kind of lag period. But I think that's important that Viridor have the chance to gather that data and present it in the right way and in a legible way. How do we disseminate that information sooner? That's the question, isn't it? I'm getting to the end of that, aren't I? Yeah.
Because it is a legitimate concern when residents see this and they ask the question, and it isn't always responded to as quickly as I think we should be doing.
We would want to do. We would want to get to that,
exactly, yeah.
Immediately. I mean, I don't know, John, it is difficult, isn't it? I mean, like I say, the level of transparency in the information that we provide, that Viridor provide
on this automatic basis is great, but how do we make it almost as soon as we get that information that we're able to respond?
Yeah, I think they're all really good points. I think it's the changing nature of the media landscape that's challenging here, and the fact that it's not quite as regulated as it was, 10 years ago, where people would come and check these sorts of things before they publish. That's no longer the way things tend to work. But I think the virtual visitor centre is by far the best tool we've got to reassure people. It's very factual and balanced, and the information on there is clear and easy to understand. Like Andrea said, the fact that you have twice a month those detailed emissions reports being uploaded onto that site, that's exactly the same information that's provided to the Environment Agency. So there's no kind of, that is the single version of the truth, as it were. So I think it should be Viridor probably that take on that role. So perhaps when we see these kind of rumours bubbling, maybe we can speak to Viridor about being a bit more proactive in terms of, getting into those groups and
use the word rumours, I would say genuine
concerns. Yeah, okay. But if yes, yeah, okay. So I will speak to Viridor to see if we can have a more proactive approach from them in terms of monitoring those social media channels in particular, and getting involved in those conversations as and when appropriate, simply to direct people to the virtual visitor centre and say, look, if you want to see the facts on this matter, go and have a look at it for yourself. It's there. I'll raise that with them, Councillor.
Okay, are there any more questions, or have we moved to the next item? Okay, so I'll just take one more question from Councillor Roche and then we'll move on.
Sorry, is the HRRC customer survey, is that on this item, or was that on the one coming up, the satisfaction survey? I just had a question about the data coming in.
That's on this item, yes.
Okay.
This item, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, so in terms of the breakdown, do we know where this data, is it Croydon, is it Sutton, is it Kingston? Basically.
Yeah, so it's an incredibly large data set. So obviously to present it all split out by the boroughs, by borough isn't possible. But I mean, it is possible, but it would make the report incredibly long. So what we do is we have that on the website, so you can access that. I think I've got the web address. I'll share that with you if it's not in the report, but I can share the link, and then you can see exactly, and you can have a look at your 3 sites. You can have a look at exactly, yeah. And what's really interesting actually is we do have some free text in those questionnaires. So there's the ability for customers to actually just freestyle and tell us exactly what they're feeling. So there's a top 10 that I've put in the summary dashboard at the bottom, but actually, it, like you say, it's nice to know specifically your sites what the feedback is. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Taylor says he wants one more question. Can you be concise? Can you do that? That would be good. Please, no, appropriate is be concise, please.
About data quality. So over the last couple of quarters, we've had waste tonnage reports that we have published and then had to go back and correct when rightfully challenges have been made that the numbers don't add up. The total tonnage of waste that's been collected, and this may well be a Sutton issue, but really it links to the last one because it's about residents' trust in data and reassuring residents that we're going to put a number out, and then 2 weeks later when they say, well, that number doesn't look right, it's not going to be changed again. So I just want a bit of a reassurance that some of the data checking processes are being reviewed, particularly, and it might only be Sutton's case, so it's related to its tonnage of waste over the last couple of quarters, which have been issued, then revised and reissued. And again, it just leads to that lack of trust in the data from residents. I think we just need to be doing everything we possibly can that trust is retained. So really just a bit of a flag that data quality is of the utmost quality. It is checked appropriately. It's only issued when we're absolutely positive on what those figures should be.
No, absolutely. I mean, data is my foundation. It's exactly, you can't make comments on the performance of contracts if you don't have the right data. And I completely agree. We must have that trust with our residents, and
And that trust is formed by getting it right and not having to go back. So, I mean, in terms of the checking process, it goes through a two-stage check process, the data that we're provided with. And if it's from two different contractors, then it goes through two checkpoints for each contractor. So in a way, it's got a double belt and braces approach. But yeah, absolutely, the accuracy of the data is really important. We are using automated weighbridge systems. We are now using automated sheets to do those checks and to pull out anomalies. So, I mean, we're handling incredibly large amounts of data, but that it still has to be accurate. So yeah, we use all the technology that's available to us, and we'll continue to keep checks on that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll move on to item number 6, which is the budget update. And we're going to hand over to Andrew again to introduce this report. And the committee is recommended to note the content of this report as well.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, so this is the budget update report for month 4. The paper provides an update on our partnership budget for the month 4, July of this financial year, and it gives us also a projected outturn for the end of the financial year. So just as a reminder, I'll talk through the background. We won't do this at every meeting, but the partnership team is required to produce a budget for consideration by this joint committee each year, and that covers the cost of delivering partnership-wide activities and running the team. At the joint committee in February 22, we agreed a partnership budget that was split out into core partnership budget, commissioning related activities, and some intelligence gathering activities as well. We monitor the budget monthly, and that allows us to flex each of those categories where needed. The main priority is obviously that total budget must not be exceeded. So in terms of the core partnership budget, you can see that there was a small overspend of just under 4,000, and you've got details of that overspend in 2.2 and 2.3. For the improvement projects, you can see that this is showing an underspend of just under 17,000. And again, the details around that are in 2.5. The strategy and commissioning budget line, the main variance here is from the intelligence gathering activities. And just as a reminder, they include the waste composition analysis, the carbon baseline work that we've commissioned, and also the resident surveys and co-design feedback. So you can see that the intelligence gathering, we have exceeded budget by just over 67,000, but we've mitigated that overspend by intensifying the use of our core partnership team. So we did a lot of the commissioning project management work ourselves in the core as part of the core team in order to mitigate that overspend on the intelligence gathering. Then finally, yep, so just to summarize then, the key figures, the total budget, we've got a small underspend of 5,232, and this equates to an underspend of 1,308 per borough. So that is our projected forecast for this financial year. Happy to take any questions or feedback.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Christie would have a couple of questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that update. I think first of all, it's useful and encouraging to see that generally there's obviously pretty careful budget management, and generally you're keeping, more or less in line with the agreed budget, except on, and you just touched on it, the under paragraph 2.6, the strategy and commissioning budget, where overall there's a relatively small variance of just under £8,000, but that's constituted by a quite wild overspend in one area and a major underspend in another area. So I just wonder if you can just say a bit more about how, it sounds like from what you've just said that the underspend in the commissioning part of the budget was in response to the overspend in the other part of that budget. So if you can just say a bit more about how that decision was reached and what that means for sort of budgeting in those areas going forward.
Thank you. Yeah. In terms of the intelligence gathering, when the budget was set, there were some assumptions made around what the cost of those activities would be. Waste composition analysis being the biggest project, and that was one of the very first indications that we were going to have what is a significant overspend. It came back a lot higher than what we budgeted. The reasons when the budget was set and when the estimates were done, we haven't done a waste composition analysis for many years. Whilst we did sort of seek indicative prices from the market, from the point of setting the budget to the point of commissioning, there was inflation, and there was a lot of challenges with getting the resources and the personnel to come and do these sort of tasks. And so that all, pulled together and resulted in a significant increase, particularly in the waste composition analysis. We did offset some of that increase with some funding, some grant funding as well. So we've tried to sort of mitigate it in other ways, but basically what we've done with that, as I say, with the commissioning support, is we can see this overspend, and so we're having to make changes in what we do now and what we'll do for the remainder of the year. So the decision-making process, your question was decision-making process, the waste composition analysis and the carbon baseline work are really important for us, particularly at this stage that we're at in looking at our future services, looking at where we're going to make improvements to our services, where are we going to save money, and all of that information, and how we're going to support our climate agendas that we've got in all 4 of the boroughs. In order to make those decisions, it's really important that we've got the data. And these decisions are going to be significant, and it's important that they are made on sound data and information. And so that was the reason we decided to go ahead with that overspend and absorb some of those commissioning and project management activities within the team.
Thank you for that. And just then, in terms of obviously having been able to achieve that reduction in commissioning costs, what does that mean for sort of future budget setting? Is that a sustainable reduction, or what does that mean for the next year, for example? Okay,
so at this stage, it's a forecast. It does put pressure on the team, but it's actually, we've done a lot of work in this last sort of 6 months that we hadn't done, as I say, for many years. I mean, we hadn't commissioned a waste composition analysis for many years, a carbon baseline that hadn't been done before. So it really is informing, and I think it's going to make our budgeting for next year more accurate, because we have got that experience now. It is something that we've been doing more of in this last 6 months, as I say. So in terms of the impact for next year, we're obviously looking at budgets for next year now, and we feel much more confident. We've got that experience now about what the market is like, and what the experience and what the support and what the time is that's needed to deliver these projects.
Councillor Taylor?
The waste composition analysis is pretty self-explanatory, I hope. What's the carbon baseline?
So what we would like to know more about is the carbon impact of our collections and related services. So our residual waste carbon management plan comes under our residual waste treatment contract. However, that isn't the only service we deliver. That's only part of the puzzle. So we need to know holistically, what is the carbon impact of the services that we undertake, our waste management, treatment, collections, transfer, HRRC. What's the carbon impact of that? Once we've established that, we can see where we can best focus our efforts. Where is the largest impact? Where can we make changes? And then we can start to quantify the investment we make. What is going to be the carbon return on that and the carbon reduction on that? So it's new. Carbon is a very new and emerging discipline, particularly for our industry. So it's a really exciting project actually, and we're looking forward to it. It's just started. That's a project that we've commissioned. It's just started, so we're really looking forward to seeing the results of that.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we've noted the report. Thank you very much. We're on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 7 and the communications report. So I'll hand over to the lead officer, which is John Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report updates the Committee on Communications Engagement and other related activity. I think the scope seems to get a bit wider every time, relating to the Phase A and Phase B contracts. And we also talk a little bit about the Phase C, the collections contracts towards the end, but I'll come to that later. The report focuses on activity that's taken place between July and September of this year. So just starting off on section 1 is an update on the triennial SLWP residence survey, as the name suggests. This survey takes place every 3 years. It's a survey of 1,000 residents, computer-aided telephone interview survey conducted amongst a demographically representative sample. That took place, the contract was awarded to DJS Research. They were appointed in June. The field work took place during July and August, and it's going to give us a really robust view of how residents feel about a wide range of waste collection and waste management issues. The margin of error will be plus or minus 3%, so that gives you a very good, accurate view on what people think of the services we provide. There is just a note on there. We struggled to get, increasingly we're finding these days that to fill the quotas of younger people. The telephone surveys are very challenging these days because younger people don't have telephones. So we had to extend the survey period a little, and we actually had to go out and conduct some face-to-face booster surveys just to get the numbers that we needed. But that shows how robust the approach is. You know, they keep going until they found the people that they need to speak to get a good robust sample. The methodology is very similar to previous surveys, as I think I've already explained in the previous committee, but it does mean that we can start plotting trends going right back to 2010. And this year we've introduced some new topics of interest, things like COVID-19 and the impact that's had on people's waste behaviours at home, levels of carbon literacy. We've started asking about that. We're expecting levels to be fairly low to start with, but again over the next 10 years, you would hope to see those increase. And we've introduced some questions around the online booking systems at some of the tips to see how people feel about that. In addition to the core survey of 1,000 residents across the partnership region, we've also conducted an additional 350 face-to-face booster surveys in the 6 wards closest to the Beddington site. Obviously, that helps us look at whether the views of people who live near Beddington, which is the kind of core of our waste management activities, differ to the wider partnership region. So the results are in, all of the surveys are completed. DJS are sort of crunching the numbers and independently verifying the results. And I will be able to present a sort of a report back to the next committee meeting for you all. Section 2 of the report, an update on the website. I talked last time about the reason we need a new website for the partnership. We want our new site to meet the highest accessibility standards. That's the core driver. We want it to be a responsive design site so that it works as well on sort of mobiles and handheld devices as it does on desktops. We want it to be hosted on a secure platform, and also just to feature a slightly more updated look and feel. It's a 10-year-old site, and it looks like it, to be honest with you. So following a competitive procurement process, we appointed Huxley Digital. They're a specialist in developing accessible websites for public sector clients, and they're a certified Crown commercial service supplier, so they know what they're doing. Work on the visual elements of the site has progressed really well. I've included a few screen grabs just to sort of give you a feel for how it's coming along. These do feature dummy text, so don't worry, this isn't what it's actually going to say. But yeah, you can see that the visual side of it has developed well, and all of the sort of style tiles and the mapping has been completed. So the next phase in the project is to populate the site with the new content, which is something that will be happening over the next couple of months, and we'll be launching the site later on in the year. But that's progressing nicely. Section 3 is a quick update on the Zero Waste Map. This is a project that's been led by the South London Partnership. They've got one fewer word than us, but they've got one more borough, just to confuse you all. So the South London Partnership is our 4 boroughs plus Richmond, and it focuses more on sort of, economic regeneration and that sort of area. And they were keen. They had some funding to create a zero waste map, and in particular, raise awareness of any businesses and local groups that are supporting that. So they've developed this really great map. Toolkits, promotional toolkits have been sent to all of the boroughs, so we'll start to see that coming out over the next few weeks and months. And obviously the hope is that residents will start using this map whenever they want information on where they can go to sort of find, repair services or secondhand shops or refill businesses and that sort of thing. Obviously, it's a map that will grow and evolve. So residents can also submit if they feel there's a business that's missing and that should be on there that isn't. They can fill out a form on the site and we can get that added. The waste composition analysis. We've mentioned that already, but I wanted to give you an update on that. It is a really important project. So we're working with Resource Futures, who are very experienced in this sort of work to carry out this analysis for us. I think if we switch to the presentation now, actually, because I've just got a few presentation slides for you, just to give you an update. And I think we can probably add these to the minutes of the meeting so that there's a record. When I drafted this report, this data is very, very fresh. So it wasn't ready. So I've just prepared a quick update for you. So if we go to the next slide. So Resource Futures are conducting it for us. There's 2 phases of sampling. Phase 1 took place in July and went very well. Phase 2 will take place in October. It's actually starting on Monday, coming on the 3rd. It's good practice to do it across 2 different seasons because waste has a seasonal nature to it. So what will happen over both the seasons, there'll be 2,400 households where we collect waste from and we sample it in really quite amazing detail, looking at exactly what's in each of the waste streams: general waste, food waste, paper and card, recycling, and the container mix. And what will happen is, particularly for the curbside households, the ones that were included, well, the streets that were included in phase 1, they'll be the same streets that we go back to in phase 2. So we've got waste from the same streets, but in different seasons. This slide shows you, this is called LOAC, which stands for the London Output Area Classification. And it was developed by the Office of National Statistics for the Mayor of London. And it's a free sort of demographic classification system. It's a bit like Acorn, that sort of thing, but it's free, which is nice, and it's open source, so anyone can access it. And that just shows you on a London level what LOAC looks like, but you can zoom right in. That grab on the right-hand side is actually Morden, I believe. I think we're in there somewhere. And you can see on a street-by-street level how each of those streets are classified by numerous different demographic groups. So what you can do, and what Resource Futures did, is make sure, first of all, that the houses that we're sampling waste from are representative of the borough as a whole. You can then also weight the results. So if there are any sort of gaps, you can weight it, and so you get a really robust view of what your waste looks like across the whole borough. But the most exciting thing from my perspective, that's really exciting because it gives you robust data. But from my perspective as a sort of a comms person, is that where we can then use this data, we'll know at a demographic level which households are producing more food waste, which households could be recycling more aerosol cans, which households are recycling milk bottles but not other types of bottles. You can get into that level of detail, and we can actually start targeting some of our campaigns at street level rather than sort of borough level. So it's really exciting. So in terms of phase 1, and I would just stress these are interim findings because phase 2 will obviously give us that more robust view, but it's such an important project. I wanted to give you an update on how phase 1 had gone, and I will come back probably at the next committee meeting when we'll have the phase 2 data to add into this, and I'll then give you much more detail at that point. But the next few slides just summarize the sort of interim findings from phase 1. So overall, just under 18,000 kilograms of waste analysed. It's a lot of waste. The real key sort of finding here is 56.5%. This is from curbside properties only. Actually, I've left communal out of this. I'll come back to why. The communal data, I'll explain now. The communal data is likely to change more than the curbside data because the way the sampling's done, the communal the curbside data covers all of your key LOAT groups because we're going back to the same streets in phase 2. Because of the nature of collecting waste from communal properties, you have to do it with an RCV, a proper truck, because you've got the big bulk bins. We're only collecting one sample of waste from each LOAT group. So the flats data at the moment only features your top LOAT group in each borough. And then phase 2 next week, we'll be going back to flats in LOAT groups 2 and 3 in each of your boroughs. I hope that makes sense, but it means that the flats data is more likely to change after phase 2 than the curbside data. So I was a bit more nervous about sharing that at the moment. But for curbside data, 56.5% of the residual waste could have been recycled by residents using the existing curbside recycling scheme. So that's quite, so it makes you, I was a bit sort of shocked by that at first. I spoke to Resource Futures and they said, no, that's really normal. You know, they said, don't worry, this isn't, they said, actually, your data is really good in terms of your, you know, weight of waste per household, etc. Your data is not bad at all. But they said that's very, very common. And the biggest offender by far is food waste, making up 29.4% of that 56.5. So, and we can even split down into more detail. So of that food waste, 8.5% was unavoidable. So things like vegetable peelings, you know, meat and fish bones, the sort of stuff that even if you were the most avid recycler, you would still have this waste. 13.1% was still packaged. So people have thrown stuff away because it's, I assume, past its sell by date, and they've just thrown it in the bin packaged. And the other 7.9% was kind of loose in the bin, but was avoidable. So that would have been things like, you know, potatoes, etc., that could have still theoretically been eaten. A further 8% could have been recycled at the HRRCs. That's things like soil and rubble and wood. A further 7.8% potentially could have been diverted elsewhere. So we're getting into things like soft plastics that you could take to your local supermarket, for example. But once you take all that into account, only 27.7% of what's in the average rubbish bin in our 4 boroughs is waste where that bin was the only realistic option for it. So there is a little bit of variance between the boroughs, but and again, we've got all that data obviously at borough level, we've got it at street level. But I think it's really telling there. I mean, it could be depressing, but also it's quite motivating because it shows how much more we can do and how much more potential there is to get out of those bins and into recycling bins. So yeah. And that's just that data presented in a pie chart there. So you can see that the food and drink. The vast majority of that, it would be food. I think drink would probably be only if it's kind of contained within a bottle. So you can see that the food really stands out there as something that we still have a lot of work to do on to convince residents to use those food waste recycling services. And then when you look at the recycling streams, it's quite interesting to look at the capture rates. So you can see it's a little bit small, isn't it? But you can see there sort of some of the materials that we're sort of being quite successful at capturing. You can see at the bottom, glass containers, that would be glass bottles and jars. We're capturing about 84% of those. So 84% of the glass bottles and jars are ending up in the recycling bin rather than the residual. But you can see aerosols, for example, you've got ferrous and non-ferrous across the both of those. They're around the 50%. So obviously a bit of an education message there just to remind people that aerosols can be recycled. I think part of the problem with there is because most of those are in the bathroom and a lot of people recycle in the kitchen. But when it comes to the bathroom, those habits that they've developed seem to slip away strangely. So aerosols just end up in the general kind of bathroom bin and then in the landfill. So yeah, so some good stats there. And on the next slide, again, some more materials there looking at, 78% of card packaging we're kind of capturing. So doing a good job on card. But again, what's interesting there is the plastic bottles, PET bottles, for example, which is a fizzy drink water bottles, 68% of those. So you'd think it would be nice to be capturing more of those than we are. So some really, really interesting data in here that we can really use with our campaigns going forward, and also help sort of improve and tweak our collection services potentially. And then the other thing that we've done is we've looked at, as you know, there are some big sort of legislation changes coming down the road. Things like EPR, which is the extended producer responsibility, which is all around sort of manufacturers and producers and suppliers taking more responsibility for the cost of dealing with the packaging that they produce, and deposit return scheme, which is the kind of reverse vending machine model where in the future residents will be able to take a plastic bottle back to a vending machine, will get 20p or something when they deposit it. So we can see there that you know, particularly EPR, extended producer responsibility, you know, in the container mix recycling, 74.7% of our container mix recycling will potentially fall within the EPR legislation. So that's massive, and that knowing that is really useful because it means we can model forward and look sort of in 5-10 years time, what do we think the impact will be on our recycling rates, on our cost of treatment, on all sorts of things. So that's really interesting. And in terms of the deposit return scheme, again, it's the container mix recycling as you would expect, where, you know, potentially up to 10% of the material currently in our container mix recycling would fall under DRS. So if it's really successful and everyone really jumps on board with this and starts returning their bottles instead of putting it in their recycling bins, that's potentially how much we might come out of our recycling bins and go elsewhere. So again, big impacts potentially. So yeah, so that's hopefully that's interesting and useful. I think, like I say, that's a very high level summary. There's a very, very big detailed spreadsheet sitting behind all this that, like I say, you can drill down to street level, demographic level, look at all of this in real detail. So I think it's going to be a very valuable piece of work for us. Just moving back to the report quickly, section 5 talks about the HRCs. I won't go into much detail there. It just references the fact that those customer satisfaction surveys are available on the website. The Beddington ERF, we've already covered quite a lot of this in some detail. We've talked about the permit variation application and the EA letter. Paragraph 6.8 covers some of the site visits that we've done in the last couple of months. It's been really nice to get people back around the facility again. So I've listed some of the visits that Viridor have hosted. The Sutton Liberal Democrat group and also the Sutton Labour group members. I should point out the Sutton Labour group members, that was actually a briefing at the Sutton Civic Centre, not at the ERF. I didn't make that clear in my reports, which I probably should have done. So apologies for that. And also obviously the tour for the joint committee members, which I hope you all found interesting and helpful. We are very keen, Viridor are very keen to facilitate group tours wherever possible. So there's an email address in there. Paragraph 6.9 talks about the fact that as well as these kind of organised groups, I've talked in the past about wanting to make it easier for individual residents who just have an interest to book onto a tour. And I have now secured some dates from Viridor. So 25th of October, 24th of Jan and 14th of March. Those are 3 dates where they're going to be effectively having an open day. And they'll have two tours, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And any resident can book onto that. Those dates are going to be published in the next few days, hopefully on the virtual visitor centre, and people can and we'll obviously promote it through our borough's social media channels and raise awareness. So I'm really pleased. At the moment, I think they're all Tuesdays, or they're all on the same day of the week. So I'm very conscious of the fact that it would be nice if alternate ones could be on a Saturday to make it even more accessible. So I'm progressing that with Viridor, but it's good to have a start on that. And also Viridor hosted on the 9th and 10th as part of Heritage Open Day events. They hosted some tours, I think 3 tours across the 2 days, and had a really good attendance to that. So it's just really nice to be getting people around there again, because I think there's nothing better than showing people and talking to them there and then. Emissions, we've talked about a lot already. I was going to talk about the campaign that we're planning on gas bottles, but I think we've covered that. Like I say, I'm quite excited about that campaign. Viridor are putting some money behind that, so hopeful that will be effective. And 6.15 talks about the fact we've approached the British Compressed Gas Association. Councillor Irons, you wrote to them, and one of the things we've asked is how we can support them with their lobbying campaign. So I'll keep you updated on work with that. Yeah, so moving on to collections and street cleansing, just very quickly, like I say, I always remind the committee it's not formally under the remit of the committee, but I do like to provide a short update because I think it's nice for you to have a holistic view of all the things that are going on. So the garden waste collection service promotion, we sort of scaled that up this year. I can provide some interim report, feedback from how that's gone. I say interim because the Kingston campaign was delayed by a couple of months because Kingston were introducing a new subscription system online. They wanted to wait until that was live before we went live. So the Kingston data is still to be added to this. But as you can see, we've had it's been a really good campaign. At the moment, in terms of return on investment, we're looking at £3.23 for every £1 spent. I can tell you I've been doing some number crunching over the last day or two with the kind of updated data, including some more accurate forecasts from Kingston. And I think once we've included all that, we could well be over £5 for every £1 spent on that campaign. So that's really pleasing, partly because, we know from our waste composition analysis that it means that some of that garden waste is coming out of the residual waste stream and going to better places. 7.5 talks about the food waste minimisation campaign. And the food waste recycling campaign. So we're targeting 15,000 households with a minimisation campaign, putting a sticker on the food caddies, giving them some reduction tips and directing them to the Love Food Hate Waste website. So that's going on 15,000 properties that have been targeted over the last 2 years with the recycling participation campaign. So it's about moving them up the waste hierarchy from recycling to minimisation. And we are just about to launch our recycling participation campaign at 7.7, where we'll be targeting 50,000 properties across the 4 boroughs. So it's a really large scale campaign, and they're going to get a no food waste sticker on the lid of their general waste bin, a leaflet through the door with lots of information about food waste and why it's so important to recycle it and how it's used to generate electricity. And they'll also get a free roll of 12 food waste caddy liners, just enough to kind of get them hooked into the habit of recycling their food waste. And we're targeting a 10% increase in participation in those targeted areas. We've actually got people out on the streets next week, going around monitoring those rounds, seeing what the current participation rates are. And obviously we'll be monitoring after the campaign as well. And then the final thing on there, 7.8, is just to flag up that we've also been hosting some tours at the Veolia MRF, which is the recycling facility sorting centre. There's a picture there of the Croydon MP, Sarah Jones, with a group of Croydon residents. So again, we're very happy to host those events as well. And now we have an AD facility in our region. I'm sure I've heard that they're very keen to host visits too. So we can now offer visits really to all of our key facilities, which is great.
Thank you very much, John. And I've got to go to Councillor Walmer, but I just wanted to thank you for organising the site visit to the energy recovery facility. I found it very interesting just to picture what happens there. It demystifies everything. You actually get to understand the process, and I think we can encourage as many residents as possible to get through the doors. And I know they were keen to get some school groups in and things like that. So I think if we can all kind of go back to our boroughs and promote that, that'd be really good for all of us. So over to Councillor Walmer.
Thank you, Chair. It's really interesting to see that there is a lot of potential for increasing food recycling, and knowing that if food rots, it produces methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, and when it goes to these digesters, that's captured and generates electricity. So I was just intrigued to know how significant is the amount of electricity that is generated in the scheme of things.
That's quite a technical question. I might have to hand over to my technical friend, but I know that AD facilities are surprisingly efficient at generating electricity. I know the Severn Trent plant. Do you know off the top of your head how many homes that powers? We can come back to you on that. It's tens of thousands of homes that can be powered through a sort of a reasonable sized AD plant. And in the leaflet that we send through the door, again, I'm off the top of my head, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but there's a picture of a banana, and then a mobile phone's kind of plugged into the banana and it's charging. And the thing is, recycling one banana skin can charge your phone 2 or 3 times or something like that. So we've managed to get a kind of a stat that's relatable. But it is substantial. And I think currently at the moment, with so much focus on energy security, and we've got all this food waste in our bins that could be being used to produce some energy, even if it is only a relatively small amount of what as a nation we need, every bit helps at the moment, doesn't it? So
I think that's what would be emitted as methane. and you're using that to.
Absolutely. Of course, the residual is not going to landfill. It's going to ERF. So methane's not such a big issue for us anymore. It used to be a huge issue. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you might as well capture. It would be far better to capture that methane and use it positively. So there's a huge environmental benefit to recycling food waste. There's also a huge financial incentive for the boroughs to recycle food waste because it's far, far cheaper to send because these facilities, they want it because it's a resource. They can sell the electricity. So rather than send it to the RF, we would much rather recycle it, and even better is not for residents not to produce it in the first place.
Councillor Roche?
Yeah, thank you. So I had two questions. The first one was about the website data in terms of seeing who goes to the website. Will we be analysing who goes to the website and where, so we can see where the weak points and the strong points are? And the zero waste map, I really like the sound of that. Sounds quite exciting. Is there scope to add like a QR code on the stickers, or to add a sticker on the refuse bins to say, check this website if you really need to put it in the bin? I think it might be everyone's becoming quite familiar with QR codes now because of COVID. It might be a way forward of promoting the website in I think a relatively easy way. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of monitoring the site and how it's used, the current site, I rely on sort of Google Analytics and do my best. I think in the previous report, actually, when I was providing an update on why we needed a new website, there was a bit more detail in terms of numbers and who accesses it. So I can certainly provide that to you. Going forward, as part of the contract that we've got with Huxley, there's also a 3-year kind of maintenance and support package in there as well. And so they'll be providing some ongoing support in terms of monitoring how the site's performing, areas that could be improved, all that sort of stuff. So we should see that improve significantly. In terms of a QR code, yeah, it's really interesting. QR codes kind of were introduced, and then people went a bit off them, and they sort of seemed like they were going away, and then they've suddenly come back again, haven't they? So yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Actually, I like the idea. We have used QR codes in some of our campaigns, and particularly at the HRRC sites for the garden. We've got some garden waste collection service adverts next to where people deposit their garden waste at the HRRC sites, and we've used QR codes on those because typically when you've got your phone on you, just take a quick snap or something. So but yeah, I agree, we can explore how else we could use that. Definitely.
Yeah, I just so the QR code could be like for the food waste, could be a certain one, but I think the zero waste map especially could be pointed rather than the website, the zero map.
Yeah,
because it's a very easy way of, oh, okay, I didn't know that was down the street. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Target the other fraction of the
Okay. So I have a question for you, Johnny, about the zero waste map. I did manage to join an in-depth session for this because we have lots of residents who are very interested in this topic. It's a great idea, and I think we want to sustain it and improve it. And I think, I'm having a look at it now, and there's lots of things that I know are missing. How is this going to be developed and looked after and nurtured and kept up to date? Because I think you've got yourselves, you've got the South London Partnership, and you've got the boroughs, and I think who's promoting it, who owns it, who takes people off as well, puts people on, and is that being thought about and planned?
Yes, good point. So just to be clear, this is a South London Partnership website project. So I've supported them in terms of, helping them to develop it and get it off the ground, and also provided them with some kind of comms and engagement advice and support. But it's very much their project. So they're managing it. They're responsible for it. Any kind of suggestions that come through from residents on the online form of businesses that should be added or ones that need to come off, that's something they'll be doing. So I will check, because I know the person that led the project to get it set up, I think, is no longer there. So I think you're right. It's a really good. These things often, there's lots of enthusiasm and they're launched, and then and then over time they sort of just they lose their impact, don't they? So let me find out from SLP who's leading on it now, and I can provide you some reassurance on that.
Yeah, and obviously we're all members of the South London Partnership, so perhaps with the chair, you can maybe, if everyone's agree, we sort of collectively make it known that we support this. We want their ask the question, perhaps how are they going to whatever. I'll let you work out the details. Yeah.
No, happy to take that away. I think we could do a joint letter to them and ask, we will just express our support of this project and would like to be kept informed and up to date with what the progress is. I think also though, I think it's a two-way street. So maybe we can come back with what our boroughs can do to promote it and what, so all of us have got climate agendas and things like that. I know that we do here. So maybe we could go back to them with suggestions of how we could help promote and support their work. But happy to take that away and come back to the next committee with some actions. So Taylor?
So 2 questions. So the first one was on the waste composition results. And the sheer kilos of waste, I think, is helpful to quantify it. It might be helpful in the analysis of the results and the presentation to have actually a quantification of carbon content and carbon that would be saved if each of those categories is diverted, because it's not always one-to-one. And what we should, and we've all discussed this, I mean, I know we've discussed it in Sutton, is sheer tonnage the right target, or is it actually looking now at the carbon value of diverting particular waste streams, and then the cost component that links onto that later on? How much did the cost us to avoid this these waste streams? So it seems as though that might actually kick us off quite early to flagging where the very high carbon value items are to focus on. And as well, whether it's avoided carbon, because things like non-recyclable plastics, if they were sent for landfill, or if they were separated and something else was done with them, they're not going to rot away and produce carbon in that manner. And it's a point that is often made for those that are opposed to incineration, and it is absolutely correct point. So that sort of analysis helps us to understand what the best treatment all round is for these items, whether it is to separate, to remove, to recycle, or well, obviously to minimize at the very top for all of that. So that's the first one. And the second one then is absolutely massively behind the campaign to increase the food waste, sortation, separation, and reuse and generating power. The big thing I would flag is that speaking to residents, a lot of them do speak to residents on the doorstep, as we do, I'm sure we all do. One of the biggest factors in residents not performing the food waste recycling is the bins get opened up and pulled out by foxes, and they have problems with closing it and making them safe, that they've been broken in the past, that they currently then don't have a food waste bin available to them. And if it's like any of the experience that many of our residents have over the last couple of years, I think, is well acknowledged issue that the numbers of containers have been much higher demand than expected. If we're going out there and trying to encourage people to recycle food, I will bet you the number one issue is, I don't have a bin. If I order one, it's going to take 6 weeks to turn up, if I think it's going to turn up at all. So can we have a concerted effort to get a large stock of food waste bins available, so that you can almost say, okay, you don't have one, so you can't recycle, well, here you go. And then subsequently target to follow up with replacement food waste bins, and even repairing food waste bins, because one of the biggest things is just the handle breaks and then it's useless. So it's probably a lot cheaper to get a bit of focus on repairing those rather than complete replacement. So I think that's everything.
So on the carbon issue first, I think you've raised some really good points there. The waste composition analysis, part of the spec was that we wanted them to tell us the split between anthropogenic and biogenic waste, which is the key issue for carbon. Anthropogenic is mainly those plastics. Biogenic is, your plant-based stuff. Because that's how you calculate the carbon impact of sending the waste to the energy recovery facility. So they are going to be doing that. The only reason they haven't is because I haven't given that categorization to them yet. So Viridor currently the way we calculate our carbon at the ERF is from a sample that's taken from the bunker, which is something that Viridor have to do every year as part of their EA reporting. They have to do a pollution inventory every year, and they have to tell the EA how much carbon the facilities produced and how much of that carbon was biogenic. And to do that, they get a specialist company in to take a sample from the bunker, and then they sift through it and effectively do a waste composition analysis. We've always been, so that's the best data we've had to date. And so that's what we've used. And it's roughly 50-50 at the ERF, actually. What we've always been very aware of, though, is that not all of the waste that goes to the ERF is our partnership waste. So, who's to say that that's not skewing our results, and that some of the waste, that's coming from other places has a different mix. So we were very keen as part of this waste composition analysis to find out at borough level, even, because it might be that our boroughs have different splits. So we will be able to tell that. I just want to make sure that we're using exactly the same classification as the Viridor, as the people that do the work for Viridor, so that they were sort of comparing apples with apples, as it were. And that's taking a little bit longer to come through than I was expecting. So as soon as I've got that data, Resource Futures will be able to punch that into their spreadsheet, and it will automatically provide all of that information that you're asking for, which is the carbon impact of those different material streams. I think we can then feed it into our carbon baselining work and say, right, okay, so we can see from this that this material is going to deliver a really good carbon saving. What does that mean in terms of the services that we need to provide to make sure we get more of that material out? What's the cost of doing that versus the carbon impact, which I think is exactly what we need to do, isn't it? In terms of the food waste campaign, you're absolutely right. We are very clear that there are sort of peaks and troughs in terms of container availability. And I know it's something from an operational perspective that some people in the partnership team are working very closely with Veolia to improve and make sure that there's better stock management, and that situation doesn't arise where people are waiting for weeks and weeks for containers. But equally, we're very aware, the comms team at Veolia are very sort of aware that before we launch any big campaign, we just double check that we have containers in stock, because it would look rather silly to do a big campaign promoting food. No, absolutely not. No. So we are very aware of that. And there have been, I think there was an issue with their supplier of food waste containers recently, and there's been a hiccup in supply. So for that reason, actually, we have delayed the campaign by a couple of weeks just to make sure we've got that decent stock level in. So that because the leaflet, that's one of the things that the leaflet says, is if you're missing any of the containers, let us know, and we'd like to get one out to you within 5-10 working days max. That's the objective.
Okay, are there any more questions? No. Okay, go ahead.
Clarification, because you did touch on it earlier. So this is about the permit variation. So you mentioned that it's going to be a 6-week process in December. The question really is, what can that consider? What are the grounds for objection? How will councils and residents be able to take part in that? I suppose it's the EA themselves who make the decision in the end. Is there an appeals process for that based on the decision? So it's really just repeating the queries that were sent. You may well, the letter that we've received, and obviously you did give us some information a bit earlier, those other questions may well have already been answered. It just didn't appear in here and you didn't mention it.
So in terms of how the consultation work, it will be hosted through gov.uk, but the EA have said that they will also notify the partnership boroughs at the time that goes live. So we will be sort of using our comms channels to make residents aware of the fact that it's live. We will probably also make them aware of our the borough's views on the application, which we've made very clear through a statement on our website that was published when we first learned about this. So In terms of the issues that will be considered, I think the EA have said that they will consider, pretty much any issue. The only issue that's not in scope within the EA is traffic movements. So that's something that we would need to look at a local level. So, but they will consider, any sort of relevant issues that are raised by members of the public or councils, etc. And what was the other question?
Is there an
Sorry,
appeals
Councillor.
process?
Oh, yes. So my understanding of it is that once they've reviewed all of the consultation responses, they then come to a conclusion. And from my reading, I might need to go back and clarify this, but I wonder if you agree, but they then consult again on their proposed approach. So they say, having considered the consultation, this is what we're minded to do. What do people think of that? And I think that's the point where if we were concerned about the direction they were taking, that would effectively be your chance to have your say. But you're right, it is, it's an EA process. It's ultimately their decision. We will have an opportunity, as will residents, to make our views known on it.
I think we did say at a previous meeting that we wanted to ensure that the partnership had, supported residents in the responding. So sometimes with these consultations, they can seem quite, complicated and a bit hard to respond to. So we wanted to ensure that we help residents respond. And I think although the traffic movement thing won't be taken into account, which is disappointing, we can discuss the exceedances. Because we're not saying the exceedances necessarily are down to particular, we know what if it's generated by these canisters, well, if you're going to have more waste going forward, they're going to have more canisters and they're going to have more exceedances. And if we haven't quite worked out how to stop that yet, why would we want to increase the tonnage? But I think we as a partnership, it's our opportunity to allow residents to respond and give them the support to do that. Any other questions? Any other business? Okay, I think that draws the meeting to a close then. Thank you for your time. Have safe journeys home, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.